The emergency lighting cast a sickly crimson glow across the observation deck, transforming Dr. Elena Rodriguez into a ghostly silhouette against the vast, star-punctured blackness of space. Outside the viewport, the shattered remnants of human civilization drifted like forgotten memories. Fragmented space stations, broken colony ships, and the desiccated husks of once proud vessels that had carried humanity's hopes beyond Earth. Her fingers, lined with microcircuitry and genetic stabilizers, traced a complex pattern across the holographic interface. Each movement was a calculated dance, every touch a potential salvation or final condemnation. The station's architecture spoke of humanity's last desperate stand. Reinforced bulkheads designed to withstand impossible pressures, emergency systems cannibalized from a dozen different technologies, the very walls themselves a testament to human adaptability. Araya, the station's artificial intelligence, projected a diagnostic overlay across Elena's field of vision. The readout was a symphony of failure. Life support at 12%, radiation shielding compromised, structural integrity declining at an exponential rate. But Elena wasn't looking at the numbers with fear. There was something else in her eyes, a cold, calculated determination that bordered on madness. 37 years, she muttered, her voice a rasp that seemed to scrape against the station's metal interior. 37 years since the first Kharkov ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. Memories flickered through her mind like broken film reels. The initial contact, a moment of scientific wonder that quickly devolved into humanity's worst nightmare. Diplomatic envoys vaporized, colonies systematically dismantled, Earth reduced to a scorched memorial of what once was. A sudden tremor ran through the station. External sensors showed the telltale energy signature of Kharkov phase drives. They were close. Too close. Elena allowed herself a mirthless chuckle. They thought they'd won. They thought humanity was finished. Her right arm, more advanced prosthetic than biological limb, began to pulse with a soft blue light. Embedded within were the most critical pieces of human genetic research, compressed data that represented centuries of scientific breakthrough. The Prometheus Protocol wasn't just a weapon. It was a promise. Araya's voice emerged, stripped of its usual clinical tone. Dr. Rodriguez, detection algorithms indicate imminent breach. Exarchoth boarding parties are preparing quantum phase entry. Let them come, Elena whispered. The station's core began to pulse with an irregular rhythm, a heartbeat of something waiting to be unleashed. Scattered throughout her personal research were fragments, genetic sequences, neurological mapping, quantum entanglement protocols that represented humanity's final evolutionary leap. Her eyes fell on a small, unremarkable container secured to her workstation. Inside sat the genetic key, a crystalline structure that contained more than just DNA. It was a blueprint, a weapon, a hope. The first signs of quantum phasing began to ripple across the station's hull. Kharkov boarding mechanisms started to dissolve the molecular barriers, creating impossible geometries of invasion. Elena knew they would be expecting a final act of desperation, a last futile resistance. They were wrong. Her neural implant connected directly to the station's primary systems. With a series of thought commands, she began initializing protocols that had been waiting, hidden, for decades. The Exarchoth believed they understood human technology. They had no idea what was coming. Araya, she commanded, initiate final transmission. Activate Prometheus Protocol. Authorization code, Lazarus Omega 9. The station's systems began to change. Something was building. Something was preparing to be unleashed. And the last human would ensure that humanity's final act would be anything but surrender. The first sensation was pain. Not the dull ache of biological limitation, but a quantum-sharp awareness that sliced through decades of suspended animation, like a razor of pure consciousness. Commander Marcus Ryder's eyes flickered, each retina a complex mosaic of biosynthetic sensors that processed information across spectrums humans once couldn't comprehend. Beside him, The other members of Apex Legion began their synchronous awakening, each body a masterpiece of genetic engineering that blurred the line between organism and weapon. Lydia Chen, the Legion's primary infiltration specialist, was first to move. Her musculature rippled with impossible fluidity, nanite-infused tissues adapting to the environment with each microscopic adjustment. Where human muscles would have atrophied after decades of inactivity, hers hummed with potential energy, recalibrating with each heartbeat. Diagnostic sequence. Ryder subvocalized, the command transmitted through neural implants that connected the entire Legion in a living, breathing network. A cascade of information flooded their collective consciousness. Lunar base structural integrity, atmospheric composition, cellular regeneration status, quantum entanglement communication channels. Each piece of data arrived not as a dry report, but as a visceral understanding that integrated directly into their shared awareness. Dr. Rodriguez's final transmission began to play, not through speakers, but directly into their neural pathways. Her voice was more than sound. It was a living data stream that rewrote their primary directive. "You are humanity's last hope," the message began, but not in the way you were originally designed. The pods around them were more than simple cryogenic chambers. They were evolutionary incubators, each a complex system that had been continuously modifying their genetic structure during decades of suspended animation. The Prometheus Protocol was no mere weapon. It was a complete biological transformation. Kai Rodriguez, no direct relation to Elena, but named in her honor, was the team's xenobiological specialist. His hands began to shift, skin momentarily becoming a perfect camouflage that mimicked the metallic surface of the lunar base, a living hologram, his body a testament to adaptive genetic engineering. Multiple anomalies detected. Aria's voice emerged, not from external speakers, but directly within their shared consciousness. Genetic drift across 37.4% of baseline human parameters. Recommend full system diagnostic. Raider's neural interface parsed the information differently. Each anomaly was a potential advantage, an evolutionary leap that transformed them from soldiers to something entirely new. A holographic display materialized, projected from Lydia's neural implant. Star charts, tactical simulations, and fragmented intelligence about the Exarchoth collective began to assemble like a living puzzle. They weren't just reviewing data. They were experiencing it, each piece of information becoming a tactile memory. "The mission parameters have changed," Ryder announced, his voice a controlled vibration that resonated through the Legion's shared neural network. "We're no longer just a recovery unit. We're humanity's resurrection." The lunar base itself seemed to respond to their awakening. Dormant systems flickered to life. Weapon caches, research terminals, quantum communication arrays that had been waiting, hibernating, for decades. Each system was a time capsule of human potential, preserved against the possibility of total extinction. Kai approached a sealed research vault, his fingertips becoming a sophisticated scanning array. "Multiple genetic repositories confirmed," he reported. "Reproduction protocols, adaptive mutation archives, xenogenetic research." They weren't just soldiers. They were an entire potential civilization compressed into 50 living vessels. A warning pulse swept through their neural network. External scanning systems had detected microfractures in their cryogenic pods, evidence of the extreme modifications they'd undergone. Each fracture told a story of cellular reconstruction, of bodies pushed beyond previous biological limitations. "Full system integration in 3 minutes," Araya reported. "Recommend final synchronization protocol." Ryder looked at his team. No, his family. The last repository of human genetic potential. Each of them carried the weight of an entire species, the culmination of humanity's most advanced scientific achievement. The Apex Legion was awake, and the universe was about to remember why humans were never meant to be forgotten. The ghost ship drifted at the edge of the Carina Nebula, its quantum-dampened hull a perfect void against the swirling celestial backdrop. Inside, the Apex Legion conducted an invasion that was less an attack and more a surgical dissection of information. Dr. Imani Okoro, the team's cinecultural analyst, moved through the abandoned Sarkoff communication hub like a digital wraith. Her neural implants weren't just scanning. They were interpreting, translating, dismantling entire cultural paradigms with each microsecond of connection. Encryption layers are biomechanical, she subvocalized to the team. Not just a security protocol. It's a living memory archive. The ship itself was a nightmare of organic technology. Corridors pulse with bioluminescent data streams. Walls seemed to breathe, membrane-like surfaces that carried information like blood carries oxygen. This wasn't a vessel. It was a living repository of alien consciousness. Kai Rodriguez interfaced with a central data node, his modified nervous system becoming a bridge between human intelligence and alien information architecture. Tendrils of quantum-linked neural pathways extended from his fingertips, penetrating the ship's biological systems. "Fascinating," he muttered, his voice a distant echo. "The Xarkoth don't just collect information. They metabolize it." Commander Ryder watched the holographic data streams that erupted from Kay's interface. Fragments of alien history, cultural memories, strategic archives. Each piece a puzzle that revealed the complex nature of their enemy. The Xarkoth Collective wasn't a unified civilization. It was a fractured ecosystem of competing genetic lineages, each fighting for dominance through information warfare and biological manipulation. Humanity had been just another resource in their endless internal conflict. Lydia Chen worked on a parallel system, her adaptive camouflage technology allowing her to merge with the ship's internal communication networks. Where traditional hacking involved breaking through barriers, her approach was more symbiotic. She became part of the system, indistinguishable from its native processes. "Multiple conflict zones identified," she reported. "The Xarkoth aren't just a single species. They're a genetic consortium. Some factions view humans as a potential genetic resource. Others see us as a threat to be eliminated." A holographic representation materialized, a complex three-dimensional network showing the intricate relationships between different Xarkoth genetic lines. It was less a political map and more a living ecosystem of genetic competition. Ryder's neural interface began to piece together a more complex picture. The systematic destruction of human civilization wasn't just a military campaign. It was a genetic research project. Humanity represented an unknown variable in the Xarkoth's millennia-long genetic engineering experiments. They'd been collecting human genetic samples, Imani realized, her voice carrying a mix of scientific fascination and visceral horror. Not for destruction, for study. Kay's interface suddenly convulsed. A burst of unexpected data, fragments of human genetic research, stolen and compressed into alien data structures. Glimpses of secret human projects, experimental technologies that even the Apex Legion hadn't known existed. "Commander," Kay's voice carried an edge of discovery. "I'm seeing references to something called the Lazarus Initiative. It predates our creation by decades." The ship around them began to react. Biological defense mechanisms started to activate, not as a direct attack, but as an immune response to their infiltration. Membrane-like walls started to contract, data streams becoming more erratic. "We've been detected," Lydia warned, her body already preparing for potential conflict. Quantum phase defensive protocols engaging. Radar's tactical overlay began to calculate potential extraction strategies. But this was more than an escape. This was intelligence gathering of the highest order. "Hold position," he commanded. "We're not leaving until we understand everything." The ghost ship continued its silent drift through the nebula. Inside, the Apex Legion conducted an invasion that would rewrite the understanding of human potential and alien limitations. Humanity's final act of resistance was becoming something far more dangerous than mere survival. The Xarkoth orbital defense platform hung like a metastatic tumor against the backdrop of a dying star system. Its architecture defied conventional understanding. A living machine that was part weapon, part biological organism, part computational matrix. Commander Marcus Ryder watched the targeting algorithms dance across his neural interface. This wasn't going to be an attack. It was going to be a surgical dismemberment of everything the Exarchov believed about warfare. Quantum entanglement protocol initiating. Lydia Chen whispered, her body already shifting into its combat configuration. Adaptive metamaterials rippled across her skin, transforming her into a living weapon that could bend light, redirect energy, exist simultaneously in multiple quantum states. The first wave of the attack wasn't explosive. It was informational. Kai Rodriguez released a weaponized data cascade, a confluence of quantum algorithms and genetic manipulation that struck at the very core of the Kharkov's defensive systems. It was a virus that wasn't just digital, but biocomputational. Each line of code carried genetic markers that would rewrite the platform's defensive protocols at a fundamental level. Dr. Imani Okoro managed the external projection. Her neural implants created a holographic interference pattern that confused the platform's sensory systems. It wasn't camouflage. It was a complete deconstruction of perception itself. Defensive matrices compromised in 3.7 seconds, she reported, her voice clinical, detached. The platform began to react, but not in any way the Exarchov had anticipated. Its biological components started to mutate, defensive systems turning against themselves in a cascading failure of genetic logic. What had been an impenetrable fortress became a living nightmare of self-destruction. Ryder's tactical overlay showed the progression, not as a traditional battle map, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of conflict. Each system's failure was a complex dance of informational warfare, genetic manipulation, and quantum-level disruption. Phase 2, he vocalized. The Apex Legion wasn't a traditional military unit. They were a weaponized evolutionary response, each member capable of transforming the battlefield at a molecular level. Lydia moved first. Her body became a quantum wave, passing through the platform's molecular structures like a ghost. But she wasn't just moving. She was rewriting the fundamental laws of physical interaction. Molecular bonds twisted. Energy patterns reorganized. The very fabric of space-time became her weapon. Kai followed, his genetic modification allowing him to interface directly with the platform's biological systems. Where Lydia disrupted, he reconstructed, turning defensive mechanisms into vectors of total systemic collapse. The Exarchov had designed their technology to be adaptive. The Apex Legion was proving that adaptation was a human invention they had barely begun to understand. A secondary defense system activated, a last-ditch quantum entanglement weapon designed to destroy any intruding consciousness. For any other infiltration team, it would have been fatal. For the Apex Legion, it was an opportunity. Dr. Imani Okoro intercepted the quantum weapon, her modified neural network transforming the destructive energy into a computational language. She didn't just survive the attack. She understood it, decoded it, repurposed it. Genetic memory banks accessed, she reported. We're downloading centuries of Exarchov strategic archives. The platform wasn't just being destroyed. It was being dissected. Every system, every defensive mechanism became a source of intelligence, a piece of a larger puzzle about the nature of their enemy. Ryder watched the cascading failure with a clinical detachment. This wasn't vengeance. This was scientific methodology elevated to an art of war. Structural integrity at 0.03%, the team's shared neural network reported. Mission objectives achieved. The dying platform leaked information like blood. Centuries of alien strategic knowledge, genetic research, cultural archives. The Apex Legion wasn't just destroying a military installation. They were extracting the very DNA of their enemy's civilization. As the platform began its final disintegration, Ryder allowed himself the briefest moment of reflection. Humanity's last weapon was proving to be something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were evolving. The Exarchoth central communication nexus sprawled across 3 interconnected planetary systems, a massive neural network that pulsed with the collective consciousness of billions of alien minds. It was the heart of their civilization. And now, its worst nightmare. Deep within the system's quantum communication relays, a singular piece of information began to propagate. Not a virus, not a traditional weapon. Something far more insidious. Dr. Imani Okoro had weaponized memory itself. The data packet she had crafted was a masterpiece of informational warfare. It wasn't an attack, but a narrative, a carefully constructed mimetic payload that would unravel the Exarchoth's entire societal fabric from within. Fragments of human history began to infiltrate the alien communication networks, not just facts, but emotional resonance. Moments of human resilience, the raw, unfiltered experiences of a species that had been pushed to the brink of extinction and refused to break. Kai Rodriguez monitored the propagation, his neural interfaces tracking the mimetic spread with clinical precision. "Fascinating," he muttered. "The information is self-replicating. Each transmission creates exponential psychological stress vectors." In the central governance chambers of the Exarchoth Collective, something unprecedented began to happen. Leaders who had orchestrated humanity's near-total destruction found themselves confronting memories that were not their own. Experiences of human resistance, moments of sacrifice, the unbreakable spirit of a species they had believed they had completely conquered. Lydia Chen worked on the external manifestations. Quantum communication arrays began to malfunction in ways that defied conventional understanding. Communication pathways twisted, creating impossible feedback loops that carried fragments of human consciousness. A Exarchoth fleet commander suddenly remembered a human child's laughter. A genetic engineering supervisor was overwhelmed by the memory of a human scientist's final moments of defiance. The collective consciousness of the Exarchoth began to fracture, infected by an emotional resonance they could not comprehend. Psychological disruption at 47.3%. Writer's tactical overlay reported. Societal cohesion algorithms beginning to destabilize. This was more than psychological warfare. It was a complete deconstruction of alien social infrastructure. The mimetic payload carried deeper layers. Embedded within the emotional memories were strategic vulnerabilities, subtle exploitations of the Exarchoth's genetic communication networks. Each transmission was a precision strike against their most fundamental communication systems. Kai detected the first signs of systemic breakdown. "The genetic memory banks are becoming unstable," he reported. "Our information is rewriting their collective historical narrative." Entire communication sectors began to go dark, not through traditional jamming, but through a complete psychological collapse. The Exarchoth's greatest strength, their interconnected genetic consciousness, was becoming their most catastrophic weakness. In the outer rim communication relays, entire fleets found themselves paralyzed. Commanders received conflicting directives, their neural networks infected with human memories, human emotions, human resilience. "We are introducing an entirely new variable into their evolutionary equation," Imani explained, her voice a clinical dissection of their strategy. "Humanity is becoming a mimetic virus within their collective consciousness." Writer watched the cascading effects. This wasn't just an attack. It was a complete reimagining of psychological warfare. The Exarchoth had believed they understood humanity. They had cataloged human genetic samples, studied human technological archives, believed they had comprehensively defeated a species. They were wrong. As the communication networks began to collapse, something unprecedented emerged. The very fabric of Exarchoth civilization began to question its own narrative. Memories of human resistance became a contagion of doubt, spreading faster than any traditional weapon could move. Societal cohesion at critical failure point, the tactical overlay reported. The Apex Legion had transformed warfare into an art of psychological reconstruction. They weren't just fighting. They were rewriting the very concept of conflict. Humanity's final weapon wasn't a weapon at all. It was a story. The laboratory was nothing like traditional human reproductive facilities. Suspended between quantum-stabilized dimensions, it existed as both a physical space and a theoretical construct, a bridge between extinction and potential. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's final gift was more than a simple genetic repository. It was a complete reimagining of human reproduction, survival, and potential. Kai Rodriguez, the guardian of this delicate process, moved between massive crystalline incubation chambers. Each chamber was a universe unto itself, containing the most complex biological system ever conceived. Artificial wombs weren't just containers. They were living ecosystems, each a carefully calibrated environment that could nurture and adapt human life in ways previously unimaginable. Genetic stability at 99.987%. He muttered, neural implants interfacing with the intricate systems. Adaptive mutation protocols functioning within acceptable parameters. The first generation would be more than simply human. They were a deliberate evolutionary leap. Children designed to survive in environments that would have killed their ancestors. Radiation-resistant cellular structures. Neural networks that could process information across quantum states. Metabolic systems that could extract nutrition from environments previously considered uninhabitable. Lydia Chen managed the quantum-entangled communication networks that would connect these new humans. Each child would be born with a neural link to the Apex Legion, a collective consciousness that transcended traditional understanding of individual identity. Neurological integration protocols initiating. She reported, her body a living interface between biological potential and technological innovation. Dr. Imani Okoro worked on the cultural matrix, a comprehensive archive of human knowledge, experience, and cultural memory that would be directly integrated into the genetic structure of each child. They wouldn't just be born. They would be born knowing. Historical records, scientific discoveries, cultural memories, artistic expressions. The entire breadth of human experience would be encoded into their very DNA. Commander Ryder watched the process with a clinical detachment that barely masked an underlying sense of wonder. Humanity's resurrection wasn't just about reproduction. It was about reimagining what it meant to be human. The first embryo began to take shape, a complex dance of genetic potential and technological intervention. Nanite scaffolding provided structural support. Quantum-tuned genetic sequences eliminated potential developmental vulnerabilities. Adaptive immune systems were integrated at the molecular level. Preliminary genetic mapping complete, Kai announced. We're looking at a baseline human template with approximately 2,347 deliberate genetic modifications. Each modification was a response to the challenges that had nearly led to human extinction. Enhanced radiation resistance, improved metabolic efficiency, neural networks that could process information at speeds that blurred the line between biological and computational intelligence. The artificial wombs were more than simple incubation chambers. They were evolutionary laboratories, each a carefully controlled environment that could simulate and adapt to potential future challenges. Cultural memory integration at 76%. Imani reported, we're encoding not just knowledge, but experiential understanding. A child would be born knowing the full history of human struggle, the near extinction, the resistance, the hope, not as dry historical fact, but as lived experience encoded at the genetic level. Ryder's tactical overlay began to map potential developmental trajectories. Each child represented a potential solution to the challenges that had nearly destroyed humanity. They were weapons. They were hope. They were a species reborn. First viable embryo stabilized, Kai announced, his voice carrying a hint of something between scientific excitement and paternal pride. The laboratory pulsed with potential. Outside, the universe that had nearly exterminated humanity continued its cold, indifferent rotation. But here, in this quantum-stabilized space, something extraordinary was happening. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was preparing to become something entirely new. The battle space defied conventional understanding of warfare. Multiple star systems collapsed into a single point of conflict, where reality itself became a weapon more potent than any traditional armament. Commander Marcus Ryder stood at the nexus of impossible geometries, his consciousness simultaneously processing thousands of potential combat scenarios. That Exarchov Supreme Chancellor's flagship wasn't just a vessel, it was a living testament to alien technological supremacy, a massive construct that could rewrite planetary ecosystems with a single computational pulse. Lydia Chen became the first wave of assault. Her body fractured into quantum states, existing simultaneously as wave and particle, information and physical matter. She wasn't attacking the ship, she was becoming the ship, her adaptive molecular structure infiltrating systems faster than any traditional weapon could penetrate. Quantum destabilization protocols initiating, she reported, her voice a digital whisper that resonated across multiple dimensional frequencies. Kai Rodriguez managed the external computational matrix. His neural networks transformed the very fabric of space-time around the alien flagship, creating interference patterns that would make traditional defensive systems utterly obsolete. Gravity became a weapon. Quantum uncertainty became a shield. Dr. Imani Okoro worked on something far more subtle. While the others engaged in direct confrontation, she was rewriting the fundamental communication protocols of the alien vessel. Each transmission became a potential existential threat, carrier waves that could unravel the very consciousness of the alien command structure. That Exarchov, Supreme Chancellor, realized something was fundamentally wrong moments before total system collapse. This wasn't a traditional battle. This was in complete deconstruction of everything they understood about warfare, about survival, about the very nature of conflict. Ryder's tactical overlay showed the battle not as a traditional three-dimensional space, but as a complex multi-dimensional algorithm. Each movement was a computational solution, each strategy a living mathematical proof of human potential. The flagship's defensive systems began to fail in ways that defied traditional understanding. Quantum entanglement weapons turned inward. Computational matrices began to consume themselves. The very technology designed to protect became the instrument of total destruction. Structural integrity becoming theoretical, Kai reported, his voice clinical, detached. The battle wasn't about destroying the ship. It was about demonstrating the fundamental limitations of the Exarchov's technological paradigm. Humanity wasn't just fighting. It was proving a complex mathematical theorem about adaptation, survival, and evolutionary potential. Lydia's infiltration reached critical mass. She wasn't just inside the ship's systems. She had become the systems. Computational pathways rewrote themselves around her adaptive consciousness, creating impossible network geometries that broke every known rule of technological interaction. The Supreme Chancellor's final communication was a burst of pure information, a desperate attempt to understand how a species they had believed extinct could mount such a comprehensive assault. Ryder intercepted the transmission. More than that, he began to decode it, to understand the fundamental xenopsychological breakdown happening at the highest levels of alien command. They're experiencing existential failure, Imani observed. Not just military defeat, a complete psychological deconstruction of their species' foundational belief systems. The flagship began to dissolve, not through traditional destruction, but through a complete computational unraveling. Systems consumed themselves. Defensive matrices became vectors of total systemic collapse. In the final moments, that Exarchov Supreme Chancellor transmitted something unexpected. Not a surrender. Not a final weapon, but a moment of pure comprehension, a recognition that humanity represented something far beyond a simple biological species. They were an evolutionary algorithm, a living solution to the most complex problem of survival. As the flagship collapsed into a singularity of pure information, Commander Ryder understood that this wasn't just a battle. It was a demonstration. Humanity's true weapon was never physical. It was potential. The first new world bloomed like a promise against the darkness of space, Novus Prime, a planet terraformed not through traditional technological means, but through a living, adaptive process that challenged every previous understanding of planetary colonization. Commander Marcus Ryder stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking a landscape that was simultaneously alien and intimately familiar. Hybrid ecosystems emerge, biological systems that merge terrestrial genetic memories with adaptive alien biochemistry. Trees with crystalline leaves captured solar energy in patterns that defied traditional photosynthesis. Soil microorganisms processed nutrients through quantum-entangled metabolic processes. This wasn't just colonization. This was communion. The first generation of post-extinction humans moved across the landscape. They were not simply children. They were living embodiments of humanity's most profound potential. Neural networks allowed instantaneous communication. Adaptive physiologies could process environmental information at molecular levels that would have seemed impossible to their ancestors. Kai Rodriguez, now serving as the colony's primary ecological architect, monitored the planetary integration systems. Each new settlement was a complex living algorithm, adapting and transforming the environment in real time. Biomass integration at 73.6%, he reported, neural interfaces pulsing with a constant stream of environmental data. The planet is learning us as much as we are learning it. Dr. Imani Okoro managed the cultural transmission protocols. Museums were no longer static repositories of information. They were living, breathing neural networks that could transfer entire cultural experiences directly into the developing consciousness of the new generation. Historical memories weren't just remembered. They were lived. Lydia Chen oversaw the defensive infrastructure, a system so advanced it blurred the line between protection and symbiosis. Planetary defense wasn't about walls or weapons. It was about creating an adaptive ecosystem that could respond to potential threats at computational speeds beyond previous comprehension. The Apex Legion had transformed from a military unit to something far more complex, the architects of human potential. Children played in fields where the ground itself seemed to respond to their movements. Adaptive learning environments that could instantaneously modify themselves to provide optimal developmental experiences. Education was no longer about transmission of information, but about unlocking inherent potential. Ryder watched a group of children manipulate holographic interfaces with thought alone. They weren't just using technology. They were becoming technology. "We are not rebuilding," he often told the colonists. "We are evolving." The first diplomatic envoys were preparing to make contact with the fractured remnants of the Hetarkoth collective, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as something entirely new, a species that had transformed its near extinction into an evolutionary leap. Technological archives recovered from the war showed that humanity's survival had never been guaranteed. Every step had been a complex calculation of potential, of adaptation, of pure unbridled possibility. A young girl approached Ryder, her eyes reflecting neural networks that could process information across quantum states. "Tell me about Earth," she requested. But it wasn't a simple request for historical information. Her neural interface was already interfacing with the collective memory archives, experiencing generations of human history in milliseconds. Ryder smiled. The story of humanity was no longer about survival. It was about transformation. The horizon stretched before them, not just a planetary landscape, but a metaphor for unlimited potential. Novus Prime was more than a new world. It was a new beginning.